Patrick Schmidt. I am the advisor to the Clarion. I teach a whole bunch of cool journalism classes. I'm going to be your moderator for today. And my goal is to help manage chat and to help our speaker in any way possible. So our speaker is Nadia Jones, who's been with us at Citrus now for, oh gosh, it's time flies, almost 2 years now. And she's been teaching as part of our communications classes and has been just a real asset to what we do here at Citrus, and very, very excited to have her here. One, today, but two, just in general, just to have her at Citrus. So, and her talk, affirming diversity in the classroom, why it matters to your students and should matter to you. So I'm going to turn the floor over to her, and it's your day.
Thank you so much, Patrick. Thank you. I'm sharing my screen. Can everyone view this? Thumbs up? Great. Okay. Okay, thank you so much for that introduction, Patrick. So as Patrick was saying, yes, I've been at Citrus. I am a communication studies professor here at Citrus, as well as other community colleges in the Los Angeles area, as well as a national online university. I am very much involved in the struggle for social justice. I spent November participating in a documentary. I got to visit Tulsa, Oklahoma, where Black Wall Street occurred 100 years ago to this year. I was speaking with Harvard historians about the mass graves that archaeologists recently are still uncovering bodies from the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre. In January, I was able to interview some economists, some historical economists from the Brookings Institute on Think Take Row, as well as Mr. William Darity. So a lot of really important people. I was able to sit down and talk with them, and it's been a really eye-opening experience. So I am so privileged to bring this presentation to you guys today, create an atmosphere of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the classroom, but not just that, why it matters. So let's get started. This experience, I am hoping that it is one of self-reflection and critical thinking, and not to prove that there's a right or a wrong way, not to assume that those who might disagree are failing to meet the standards of equity-mindedness in the classroom. My goal, or the essence for this presentation, is actually the opposite of criticism. It's reflection on our own ideas, right? Our own biases, our own assumptions, and how they might be showing up in the classrooms and how they can be further developed into conversations with others, maybe not necessarily on campus or at work, because, you know, we can't always be our true authentic selves at work. So longitudinally down the line, maybe in your own social circle, these conversations can be further developed. But it is my hope that this will be a tool not for exposing flaws, but for reflecting on, you know, again, our individual assumptions, and most notably, increasing one's own understanding. Next slide. Okay, so the goal for today's presentation is to first highlight the critical connection between diversity, equity, inclusion in the classroom, and their critical connection to the learning outcomes of our students and student success, with, of course, a focus today on minoritized students in the community college settings. In addition, much of what I share today will certainly have broader applications, right? But these symbols here, there we are. These symbols here, this first one, this represents us in the trenches as instructors. This one in the middle represents us as instructors offering authentic care. And this one over here represents student success. And that's what our focus is going to be on today. So listen, last summer, we as a nation reached critical mass in regards to our relationship with race. And you've probably been on 1,000 Zoom conference calls about racism bias by now, right? So there might be this question of, I have all this information, too much information, now what, right? Because we don't want you to forget, you know, and just go back to doing what you are normally doing. So hopefully we can bridge the gap between processing the information that you've received and putting it into practice in our classrooms and why it's so urgent to do so. So today we'll cover some best practices that you can implement right now in the classroom, as well as some tips that are going to support diversity that'll make our classrooms here at Citrus more inclusive while boosting morale, increasing performance, and increasing student learning outcomes. And I can tell you guys, coming out of this pandemic, our students are going to need a little bit of boost of morale. Okay, so race is not an easy conversation to have. So let me cognitively disarm you by starting off the conversation by talking about something that everybody loves, guacamole, right? I think everybody loves guacamole. I don't know, but I see some smiles. Thank you, Elizabeth, for that. Okay, so this summer when George Floyd happened, just like you guys, I was like, what is going on in the nation right now? And I was shocked. But anyway, I went to the grocery store to make guacamole. So I went to look for to grab some avocados, salsa. I put, some special stuff in mine. So I get to the checkout stand. This is a grocery checkout lady that I always see. She's a regular checkout lady, so she feels comfortable having dialogue with me. So I checking out and she says, she says, all this stuff that you guys are doing, messing with the products. I want you to know that Uncle Ben was a chef. He was a chef, I tell you, and you should not be changing his name and making all this trouble with these products. So this was not, she was really upset. So this was not going to be a teachable moment, right? And I was like, I just really am here for avocados. I really don't want this drama today. So I didn't really say anything, right? And, whatever. I didn't say anything. So before I begin, it's important to note that historically, when things happen, we don't always have the historical outcome, we don't always have the historical context. So things that happened in history are continuing to dictate outcomes in present day, and also behaviors, attitudes, assumptions, but we don't have time to contextualize everything. So we sometimes lack understanding. That's all it is. So before I even begin with this slide, The Power of a Name, it's important for me to note that historically, the misuse of people of color's names, it's been used as a tool of degradation. Black men during slavery were addressed as boy and uncle, and Black women were addressed as auntie or girl. This practice of addressing Blacks by such words, it was meant to denote disrespect. It was meant to make them feel inferior, and it was meant to reduce their identity to that of less than a human being. Okay, let's just be very clear. And uncle was a term of degradation used during slavery to emasculate enslaved men. Okay, and in modern day, we can look at the mocking of now Vice President Kamala Harris's name during the election. That was very readily evident, right? Names for people of color, you need to understand that they hold ancestral and historical significance for many minorities, immigrants, and English learning students, right? The assistant professor at UC Riverside, Rita Colai, she stated that when a student enters the classroom and teachers, consciously or not, disregard, mispronounce, or change the name of their students, they're in a sense disregarding that student's identity, that student's family, that student's culture as well. So you might be thinking, really, Nadaya, I think you're going too far with this. Like, really, seriously, what's the big deal? Not Nadaya, but the research tells us that a person's name is the greatest connection to their own identity and individuality. So a simple gesture just reaffirms your student's identity. So let me just read you this quote. It's a bit covered up. I apologize. So we as educators, we definitely, we're constantly challenging our students to learn information. I'm up here reading this quote in the right-hand corner. Educators constantly challenge students to learn information that they may struggle with. We speak with an argot of academic lingo specific to our discipline. We communicate new concepts. We're constantly, challenging our students to push themselves in their learning and their development. So any educator who downplays the importance of saying a student's name correctly does so from a standpoint of privilege that their students rarely have, right? And that's true. We do all those things. And so this one may seem small, but I am telling you, I've seen students' face light up to say, oh my gosh, that professor knows me, knows my name. Whatever you have to say after that, let's say, a student is spelling a turn in work. Hey, Trevante, I noticed you missed some assignments. All of a sudden, it's like, hey, that's that teacher that knows me. So whatever you have to say will be better received because it's framed as coming from a place of partnership, authentic care, as opposed to simply condemnation. And it's a sign of courtesy, and it's a way to recognize them, and it's a really easy way to establish, substantive connection with our students. So don't downplay that, the power of a name. So, socioeconomic and cultural awareness. Sorry, I'm going to try to move this chat or delete this chat box. Thank you. Sorry about that. So when COVID first started, I had a student, like, I think it was the last day of class, and she stopped me. Everybody was leaving. She was like, I know that we're going to be off campus, but if the Citrus doesn't continue their food pantry program, me and my daughter are going to starve. And I was like, whoa. She was dependent on those services, and I'll never forget it because the look in her eyes, and I can't imagine what it is like for my family not to know where their next meal is coming from. So that really affected me. So we just need to have a socioeconomic and cultural awareness. Know that low-income students, they can experience difficult transitions to college. And when these students, when they do self-identify as lower class, they can begin to court intentions of dropping out. Know that these students have a limited repertoire of learning strategies available to them. And, although it would be great if our students were supported the way that they support their students, for example, in Denmark, where, the students get to go to school for free. I love Denmark, by the way. They get paid to go to school, actually. Unfortunately, the reality is that many of our students in community college, they're homeless. Our students, they're caring for additional extended family. Our students, some of them have even been to prison. So that's okay though. You know why? Because we live and are increasingly moving toward a world where our experiences are our strength. It may have been looked down upon, for example, to speak another language 10 years ago, but now it makes somebody a preferred job candidate over a monolingual one, right? So our differences are now being appreciated. They're being celebrated as our strengths. And this should also translate into the classroom. Our differences, so just remember, and I apologize if you can hear my gardener decided to come today, of course. So I apologize if it's noisy in my background, but I'm going to speak a bit louder. So just remember to have a socioeconomic awareness. One more story that I would like to share. I had a student, and this is increasingly more relevant because we have online. We're online, and you might have a Zoom, meeting where your students have black camera, and it's irritating, it's frustrating. So I had a public speaking course where I'm like, you guys need to be standing up during your speeches. And of course, a couple of students were sitting. So that student that was sitting emailed me, and she was like, oh, I have surgeries coming up. And I was like, okay, I'll coordinate with you. Once she did that, she felt comfortable enough to say, you know what, I'm in a wheelchair and I can't stand up during my speeches. And I was like, oh my gosh, because I made assumptions about her as a student, right? Without all the facts. So although, just remember that we need to have an awareness of that, especially being online. And I also want to draw your attention to the no cost open educational resources below. And I know that we're not social workers, but our ability to have that awareness can seriously impact our students' well-being and their academic performance. Has anybody, by show of hands in the chat, has anybody ever been mortified by making the wrong assumption about a student? And if so, would anybody any brave soul like to share one experience? Patrick, let me know if there's anybody. Okay, great. Thank you.
I feel like I'm being an overachiever today, so please forgive me.
No, it's great.
So I got hired here about 12 years ago, and in the math department, it was very militant. And I was in the military, so to me, I had no problem with that. I served the Marine Corps and very honorably for 4 years, and I had no problem marching to any beat. But simply put, we had colleagues that were locking the door.
What?
Oh my goodness. I recall thinking like, how dare they? And the assumption that I made was that they were targeting, and this is at no fault at the faculty member, because I'm not throwing anybody under the bus,
Right.
but they wanted their students to be there properly. And I agree with all that soft skills building that we could do in math.
Right.
So long story short, I've never subscribed to that line of reasoning. That just wasn't the way that I perceived that, and for many reasons. So
What were some of the reasons? I'd be curious to know, what were some of the reasons that you never subscribed to that?
oh man, they're obvious. Like, I'm talking about people who are taking like the bus,
Thank you.
who don't have transportation. But I want to fast forward because it hit home really hard this pandemic. So I noticed a student this time last year showing up late to my second semester calculus, and he was constantly showing up late and falling asleep. And I was thinking, who does that?
Right.
And I didn't want to put him in the spot because the reality is I just don't know their background. I don't know what they were going through the night before, and I'm not going to be assuming that they were gaming all night. That's just not the assumptions that I'm going to make. So I find out months later that he was at his mother's deathbed. She was fighting cancer. And to think that I would be the one that locks that door when he's showing up, oh, hell no.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Jesus.
Wow, did that put a slap in my face? I mean, I felt so good that I never did that, and I felt even better that I never called them out on that. That I not once put them on the spot and said, you know what, you need to get it together and wake up. I didn't do that because I just did not know what he was going through. And it really, I mean, I'm still recovering from that.
Mm.
So he was fighting for that aim. I mean, he was just that gun-ho. And I remember I was so militant about the grading system. And that's what I meant today when I was telling Dr. Harris that I missed the mark. And the mark that I missed was that he was shooting for content, but I wasn't there to support him.
Mm. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing
It hurts,
that.
people.
That's
It
powerful.
really hurts.
It does.
Really
It's
hurts.
powerful. And I think that the pandemic is really bringing these socioeconomic issues to the forefront where we can no longer ignore them. We can't ignore them. Yeah, we can. Yeah. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you so much for sharing.
Welcome.
That's powerful. Thank you.
And it's real too. And
It is.
I'm struggling with that, but
it is. You're not alone. We're all like trying to be more supportive of our students once we realize, that they're fighting just as hard. Okay, moving on. I'm going to open up the floor to share again, but I just moving on because we started late. Okay, so intrusive intervention. Intrusive intervention simply means being proactive and intentional about authentically engaging our students in the classroom. Research shows that it's extremely effective in engaging your minority students, especially your minority male students. So basically your minority students, your minority male students, according to the research now, they either feel hyper surveilled or they feel invisible. And it's time for us to find a healthier balance for them, right? So intrusive intervention increases engagement immediately as well as longitudinally down the line. It increases retention rates, and researchers tell us that our expectations of them as educators is directly related to their success in the classroom. And we'll get into that a little bit more later. What we say and how we say it matters. So we want to connect with our students as individuals. We want to be fully present during conversations with them. So you pick up on little things. And like, there's so many examples I could share. And when we engage in conversation with them, we want to communicate high expectations surrounding their aptitude and their abilities. We want to be willing to engage with students outside of the classroom as well. So there was a study done, and it showed they surveyed minority students, and they said that when they see us professors on campus, we do our best to avoid them. We put our head down, we walk the other way, they see us avoiding them. They're not stupid, so just say hi. It's actually really not funny, but just say hi to them. They're humans. Just say hello. You don't have to take them home to dinner, but just engage with them outside of the classroom. I had 2 minority male students who happened to be doing exceptional work on their first speeches at another campus. I made it a point to praise them. And even though we're online, I did a shout out announcement. I made it a point to publicly praise them. I made it a point to personally praise them. Guess what? Those 2 students are the only 2 students in my classroom that participated in the speech contest, and one of them placed. And they both, in separate emails, were like, Miss Heron, you gave us confidence. We would have never done anything like this, but you recognizing our ability, you gave us confidence. So although it doesn't matter where the encouragement comes from, although this example may seem anecdotal, the overall research says that intrusive intervention works. Now, some best practices for the classroom include connecting course content to students' lived experiences. Remember, I told you our experiences are now our strength. Even if you've been to prison, even if you've made some mistakes, your experiences they're turning around, and they can be our strength because we can learn from mistakes. We can learn from your experiences, right? And having students connect their lived experiences, it sends a message: you matter and your experiences matter. Acknowledging the intellectual contributions of people of color specific to your discipline or field of study, infusing, this one is big as well. And I want to encourage you that there are minorities salient to every field of study. It is 2021. So if you can't find anyone, please reach out and I'll send you a list, okay? They're in every field of study. Also, this one's a big one: infuse positive images and examples of people of color into your course content. Are the images in your face-to-face lectures, are they diverse? Are the images in your online content monochromatic, or do they reflect the diverse student population that we serve? Because representation matters. It reaffirms your students' identity, their development, it improves self-concept, and it just does something to see somebody that looks like you in your field, right? Include us, include minorities in your course content, because when we are included, it's often from a marginalized perspective as criminals, thugs, perpetrators of violence, when we are more often on the receiving end of that violence. These practices help you to build relationships with your students without us even trying, because through this course material, you're conveying messages of validation, you're conveying messages of a sense of belonging and authentic care. At the end of the day, inclusivity is a feeling. And through these best practices, you bring feelings of inclusion. And I hear some of you saying, well, just kidding. All of you are on mute, so I can't hear anything, but allow me to play the devil's advocate. Some of you might be thinking, well, she has a discipline that's in communication, so I can't implement this in biology. I can't implement this in calculus, and I can't implement this in psychology. Oh, no way, not nursing. Allow me to dissuade you of that notion, because this type of thinking is a recipe for institutional failure, and as a byproduct, student failure. We have failed our students for far too long. The link between diversity, equity, and inclusive teaching practices and improved learning outcomes, they're not exclusive to any one domain or any single field of discipline or field of study, right? In an article detailing teaching diversity and democracy across disciplines, psychologist Jack Meacham, he emphasized that success in obtaining these outcomes requires students to engage with questions of diversity and democracy throughout their education. For this to happen, all faculty in all disciplines must commit to teaching towards these outcomes. Now, this might mean highlighting traditional course content with that attends to more diverse perspectives, or you might need to draw content from multiple disciplines. But I do acknowledge the challenge of teaching towards these outcomes for those of you that are more accustomed to a more narrow subdisciplinary focus, right? For those faculty, the better question, if you are struggling with this, is to ask yourself not what you will teach, but how your method of teaching can encourage democratic outcomes and engagement with diversity. I am telling you, I want to encourage you that there's an opportunity somewhere there for all disciplines. Now, I want to open the floor to faculty that have used their own unique activities or techniques or best practices to say, what's worked for them. Just maybe one or two, and then we'll get to the conclusion of our presentation today. So Patrick, if you want to have anybody share what's been working, maybe that you tried something out of all these presentations, maybe been able to implement something. Anybody? Thank you. Jesus has raised his hand, Patrick.
I'll defer to Douglas. I've already talked, but I don't like the use of the F word you were using, the failure piece. I think we should be saying delaying success. How about that?
All right, I'll go
I
with
mean,
that.
I've been trying to improve my vocabulary, and F words such as fear, failure, I'm just
I love that.
divorcing myself from that.
All right.
Delaying success has really worked with my students, and I look at them as promise too, not at risk or any of that.
I love that. Thank you, Jesus. All right, Patrick, anyone else?
Yeah, Doug, go ahead. Yeah.
Sure. What I've been doing is extremely time consuming, so I don't know how many people want to jump on this bandwagon, but what I started doing last spring when we went remote was literally once a month, I spent 10 minutes with every single student one-on-one in Zoom in every single one of my classes. And all spring, despite everything, I only lost one student. And this year I've done the same thing fall and winter, and I've only lost twice. It's very time consuming, but the largest reason I brought it up was because, as you said, there are all of these people in your class that you just don't know, and the rule, at least for me in that time, is within reason, and realizing I am not a counselor and certainly not a personal counselor, that we can discuss the class, we can discuss their careers, if they're having issues that deal with family or COVID and they want to discuss that, realizing that I am not in a position to guide them, I will listen. But just discussing, students who are working 2 and 3 jobs, trying to help feed the home, or are in extended families where 2 or 3 generations are living in the same home, students who cannot get online for my class because they don't have internet and cannot afford it, or they do have it, but they also have 3 other siblings who are all in other Zoom classes, and parents are coordinating. And it has just been such an eye-opener to remind me, one, how very lucky I was when I went to school some time ago, but 2, how many challenges in so many ways our students face all the time. And the economic and the emotional, you talked about school being a sanction. And I think that's so hard for our students right now in Zoom, that for many of them, we were the wonderful place to go to escape some of this. And now it's all there. It's just been a better learning experience, I think, for me than for them. But the one thing it has done is I literally, in the last year, have only in all of my classes lost 3 students.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. Okay, I thank you, Douglas. And Douglas's aim, I picked up from that, was in the individualized attention for his students. I know Liana, I saw a couple more hands. Let's try to get a couple more in, if we can, Patrick.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. We'll go ahead and go. Yeah, Lena. Yeah.
Yes. Hi, Lena. Thanks. So I love what you said, Douglas. I think that is such an important thing for students. For those of you that don't know me, I'm a counselor in the EOP&S program. So I'm not on the instructional side as often as maybe I'd like to be, but on the counseling side, I think that time spent with students goes such a long way. And even though you're not counselors and you may not know necessarily where to send students, a lot of students come to us after many semesters of struggling. And my wish and hope would be that they feel more comfortable reaching out to their faculty, and their faculty at least feels comfortable referring them to come see us, because they don't even know sometimes what is available to them. And so I love that you do that, because you don't have to know all the answers, but you could tell them, hey, there's a counselor you could talk to, and send them over to meet with us. I think that's great. but so that wasn't why I raised my hand to share, but I just wanted to share that because I really do appreciate it. And then on my teaching end of things, one thing that I have started doing when I do teach is including snippets about diversity and inclusion in my syllabus, because it may, as a counselor, there is a good chance to like bring up those conversations in our counseling classes because they're very self-reflective. So I feel like I have a privilege in that, in just in the material that I teach. But I have friends that teach in other disciplines, and sometimes we have these conversations. And they say, well, how can I talk about this in the classroom? Like, where does it come up in a bio class or in a music class or, you know, places like that? And I say, well, it doesn't necessarily have to come up day to day, but if from the get-go, there is something that lets students know that you're a champion for diversity and inclusion and that you support every student, that already sets the tone to get them to feel comfortable communicating with you and asking you if they need help with things, because most of my students, they don't go to office hours and I try and push them and they just feel intimidated. And so I think just kind of setting some kind of tone at the beginning, just like we do with students that have disabilities. Most of us, I think in our syllabus, I don't know if we're legally mandated to, but there's something in there about accommodations for disabilities. What if we included something in our syllabus about basic needs resources or accommodations for other life challenges, and just being open to be available for students to come to us as their instructors, knowing that they can talk to us not just about the subject matter that we're teaching, but about other things that might be preventing them from being successful in the class. So I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Thank you, Elena. Thank you so much. Okay, we're gonna move on. So
We do have one more hand up, if that's okay, or do we want to wait on that?
We're gonna wait till the end because we have maybe only 30 minutes left, and we have two faculty that are going to share the IAP test. So if we have, we're going to definitely circle back at the end, I promise. But Lena, so setting the tone for your students through the language that you use in your course syllabus, that is amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. Okay, moving on, here is why it matters. Classrooms are becoming, other than the nation's reckoning with race, in addition to that, classrooms are becoming more racially and ethnically diverse. However, the faculty that serves this student population remains stubbornly monochromatic. So this is from the, these statistics are from the National Center for Education and Statistics. 52.9% of undergrads are white and 81% of the faculty are white. And so these statistics really speak to the chasm and polarization that have long impeded meaningful progress in the aim of social justice and mobilizing for change in the classroom. And moreover, this profound gap is a primer for a slurry of potentially harmful interactions, similar to what we saw with the accounting professor out of UCLA, Gordon Klein, as well as the Iowa school teacher and the pretend you're a slave assignment, right? Community colleges where we work serve as the primary pathway into public post-secondary education for our underserved population. While we are recognized and we have a reputation for providing access, this access has not translated into success. Recent data indicates that only 24% of community college students will complete their goals by earning a certificate, degree, or transferring to that four-year college. And for Black and Latino males, their success is even lower. We are, sorry, Jesus, failing them. And we failed them for far too long. I want you to know that if a Black student makes it into your classroom, know that they have defied the odds, know that their existence in your classroom means that they have overcome and continue to overcome with an impossible courage. They continue to participate in a system designed for their failure and a system that regularly inflicts penalty on them based on the color of their skin.
That's a lot of F words. That's a lot of F words.
I'm sorry.
I will have to say that statistics is voodoo math.
Okay, let me finish this.
Yes,
so
please
mute
carry
him,
on.
Patrick, please.
But no more F words.
This system was through systemic forces such as economics, educational bias, institutional inequality, they continue to bear the weight of American racism through labor market discrimination, grossly attenuated wealth, confinement to impoverished neighborhoods, disproportionate exposure to inferior schooling, significantly greater danger in encounters with law enforcement and the criminal justice system. And this one is big, the general social disdain and devaluation of Black lives. Know that when your students, the Black ones, when a Black student signs their name on the papers that they hand in to you, they are more than likely signing their name of the man who owned their great, 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 great grandparent in slavery. Pause for 1 second and realize how deep the veins of systemic racism run. Think about that. So many of these students, they're defeated before they even walk in the door, but they still do walk through your classroom doors, and they will continue to. They are often met with teachers who express dissent for their skin through microaggressions in the classroom, a pathologizing of their culture. These affronts are often coupled with assumptions of criminality and ascriptions of their intelligence, while they are more accurately experiencing historical growth in education. In fact, in 2015, the percentage of Black high school graduates enrolled in college jumped to historical, jumped to heights that had never been reached before. And this was exceeding every other demographic. Further, high school graduation rates for Black students rose to over 70%, which outpaced the growth for any other group. But just because they're capable does not mean that they do not fail. The practices covered today matter because your expectations of our students, the biases that we bring into the classroom, definitely influences how they perform. We start forming biases and in-groups and out-groups at a really young age. So I'm gonna cue up this video for you. And as we watch this video, I want you to begin thinking about your story, more so how your story was formed and shaped. How would you describe the racial and ethnic class makeup of where you grew up? Who did you see in your schools? Who was teaching in the front of the classroom of those schools? How were differences treated? Did you have any relationships with people of color? And like, it's just you, so we can get really, really real and get really more specific. What did the people look like who came home to dinner, right? Who came over for sleepovers? Were the people different than your family? Were the people that basically, were there any explicit or implicit boundaries that you were very aware of growing up? For example, a teacher at another campus shared with me, we were discussing this, her dad was like, you do not bring Black people home because they're dirty. So her parents really said that and they enforced it. So those were the kind of boundaries demarcated in her house. But it doesn't have to be about race. It could be about ethnicity, religion, class, etc. So just begin to think about those things in your personal life as we watch this video.
The Imus affair has once again raised questions about race and racial bias in our society. Most of us would like to think that we are not racist, but could we harbor prejudices that we may not even be aware of? A few years ago, we showed you a surprising scientific test that can reveal hidden racial bias. It's a test worth looking at again this week. Here's Sarah James.
I want to take a moment to apologize for an insensitive and ill-conceived remark we made.
While Don Imus has apologized for his racial slurs, he insists he's not a racist. But is it possible that virtually all of us have a hidden racial bias, hidden even from ourselves? Several years ago, Dateline brought together two groups of volunteers, African American and white, who agreed to take a test scientifically designed to answer just that question. Here's how it works. These words and faces appear rapidly, one after another, around the screen. The test taker is supposed to link one to the left or right box here in the center, linking positive words like friend to good, negative words like awful to bad, white faces with white, Black faces with black. And it's the mistakes that are so revealing.
We find that frequently. Some people are disturbed by the results. Ready? Go.
Dateline put this experiment to a difficult challenge, testing a cross-section of men and women, including some who have impeccable credentials in race relations. People like Rhonda, a civil rights attorney.
Okay, here it is.
During the first half of the test, black is linked to bad and white is linked to good.
Right.
For Rhonda, this half of the test is a breeze. She never makes a mistake.
Okay, very good. Now, we'll give you the other one.
But let's see how she does when the information is reversed. When the left box, marked bad, has a white face, and the right box, labeled good, has a black face.
Left.
Suddenly, the test becomes much more difficult for Rhonda. About a third of the way through, she makes a mistake, linking the white face to the right box, even though that shows a black face.
I lost it.
Okay. Rhonda's score indicates a strong preference for white. Is this because she unconsciously associates white with good?
Well, I could tell when I was taking it, I had so much of an easier time doing the white with good, much to my dismay. We all might be prejudiced in ways we're not aware. So
Mazar and Banaji of Harvard University and Anthony Greenwald of the University of Washington created this test. What do you think this test reveals that perhaps we didn't know before?
how fair are we being when we judge a person?
Okay.
Betsy, an events planner, had similar results.
Left, right.
Once again, on the part of the test which associates black with good and white with bad, a white test taker flounders.
Wait, you hold it together almost to the end.
Betsy's test shows a preference for white.
There would be many people who would say, what's wrong with showing a preference for your own race?
In some contexts, it's actually illegal to do so. In employment contexts, in college admissions.
But what does all this prove? Like the other participants, Jeff first took the test individually on a computer, and his test too revealed a preference for white. But he refused the subsequent studio test, saying he doesn't think the experiment reveals anything at all.
I think the test for a person like myself, who has some spatial difficulties and left-right difficulties, is questionable.
Professor Banaji, Jeff is questioning your test. Well, Jeff's experience is not unusual. Let's say you are having spatial difficulties, or let's say you've never used a computer before. It could easily have been the case that if that was the problem, that we could see a strong preference for black over white, but that didn't happen.
In fact, this experiment has passed scientific scrutiny, and the results of the professor's experiments have been published in leading psychological journals. Our results reflect the professor's findings.
Something like 79 or 80% of white Americans who take the test show a preference for white over black.
And as revealing as those results are, the biggest surprise is yet to come.
Left.
Joan is a sales and marketing consultant. Even for many black test takers, the more challenging part of the test seems to be when black is associated with good and white with bad.
Okay, didn't get halfway through. We'll start over. Ready?
After 2 attempts, she still can't make it to the end.
I've done it again.
Even so, Joan still thought she'd show a preference for her own race.
Would you be surprised then, Joan, if I said that your test showed a slight preference for white?
Yes, I would be.
Does it shock you?
Yes.
You're flabbergasted.
I'm flabbergasted.
And Joan isn't alone. Dennis is the leader of a civil rights organization. According to his test in the studio, Dennis is neutral, but his individual computer test showed a preference for white. His response?
All we had in images were white through the type of media outlets that we were exposed to during my age generation. And that was a constant reinforcement over and over again.
Of the African Americans the professors have tested, 42% show a preference for whites. A large number, especially when you consider that only 17% of whites show a preference for blacks.
So left, right.
And one of the other African Americans we tested, Heather, is an assistant district attorney. On the part of the test where the black face is paired with the word bad, Heather has noticeable difficulty and can't finish. She showed a strong preference for African Americans, and her pride was unabashed.
This made me feel more comfortable knowing that I've embraced my culture.
Randall, a high school music teacher, also showed a preference for his own race.
Does it concern you at all that you have a strong preference for African Americans?
Does that score mean that I do not like European Americans? No. Is my subconscious aware of the condition that African Americans are in this country at this particular point? My conscious is.
According to the research, 48% of African Americans have a preference for their own race.
That's exactly what it comes out as, a strong preference for blacks. And it doesn't.
The professors note that there's a difference in reactions between blacks and whites when they find out they have a preference for their own race.
Of course it bothers me, but
You could say it's pride or prejudice. What blacks consider a badge of healthy self-esteem, many whites regard as an embarrassing revelation.
when I did poorly on the black being good, is it because I can't come to say that I'm bad? And is it just in our nature that there has to be an us and a them? And them is going to be the bad guy.
The professors say this test also reveals something else, something more subtle, but equally important, that even unconscious racial biases may affect your behavior. For instance, do white teachers unconsciously favor white students? Jennifer teaches 6th grade.
Right. Jennifer, your score came out as a strong preference for whites. Do you believe that those unconscious attitudes for whites affects your teaching?
I would hope not. I don't view people by what they look like. I view people on what they can do and what they feel and how they are.
These aren't just words and faces on a screen, not just abstract images. This test suggests that when it comes to the potent question of race, our subconscious is making decisions every day. Decisions that in real time, in real life, have real consequences.
This test has now become even more widely accepted. It's available in 19 other countries and 16 different languages.
Thank you guys for watching. Okay, so I'm going to stop it right there. So now we have had some brave souls, some brave faculty take this test, and I want to give them the opportunity to share their results. Before we do that, I just want to say I apologize for cutting you off, Jesus, but we lost that 30 minutes, so we're really crunched for time. So I would ask that faculty to keep your responses to like 1 to 2 minutes for the test that you took. And then I also want to say that there are some limitations to this test. The limitations of this test include that there are only 2 races, right? Black and white. And of course, there are many more races. And the test is actually measuring only one part of your brain, the automatic default response. So this test points out our automatic biases. And, you know, so we need to be aware of the limitations and kind of just use this as a tool to take inventory, if you will. Okay, so the 2 faculty that took this test, you have the floor.
All right, I'll jump in. I know I took this test and it came out for me as no preference, which was, I suppose, a good thing in the end. And it was also very interesting because my background, so I was pretty much born and raised in Wyoming. My high school was 100% white. We had no one who in my entire high school who wasn't white. So for me, there were 2 kinds of people who came out of my school. One was somebody who has no preference because we see everyone as the same because we're all the same, especially in a small town like that. You're literally all the same. And then I have some very deep-seated hateful people who I went to school with. So and I don't know where the middle ground is on that, but it's very interesting that you know, it's cultural, but it's also, there's something deep inside our brains, that subconscious end of things, that automatic response that it's good to know, and it's good to challenge that, and it's good to challenge yourself to kind of think about, well, where do you fit, where do you stand, and I will drop the link into the chat at the end of our talk today if anyone wants to take it.
Thank you so much, Patrick. Is the other person that took the test, are they willing to share? It's okay if they're not.
I don't know if the other person made it today or
We're
not.
gonna assume that they're not. Okay, that's okay. So, and you have to be careful, you know, gosh, in this day and age, you know, everything's considered offensive. So I just want to reiterate that this is about an automatic bias or preference, which has nothing, it doesn't equal racism. I just want to say that. So the test points out our automatic biases, and these are biases that we're kind of pre-wired for, given the history of our nation. We're only now beginning to reconcile the nature or the science of our biases with historical events such as, you know, systemic racism. And the reason why this conversation is so difficult to have is that there's this fear of being perceived as racist, you know, especially if you're white. And that's not fair, right? And Patrick, thank you for sharing. You had no bias, which means you dislike or like your students equally. So that's great. That's great news. So unconscious bias, implicit bias, it definitely affects our behavior, right? So when it comes to race, our subconscious is constantly making decisions with very real results and very real consequences. So this video teaches us how to go deeper, go beyond our assumptions, and provide that disconforming evidence of our assumptions, because, you know, when they show up in the classroom, it matters. The first psychologist to study this was Harvard professor. His name was Robert Rosenthal. And he found that the expectations that instructors have of their students affect moment-to-moment interactions in 1,000 invisible ways. Instructors give students that they expect to succeed more time to answer questions, more specific feedback, and more approval. They're nonverbal. They consistently touch, nod, and smile with students that they expect to succeed. In your classroom, let's say, you know, you see a student, oh, she looks really smart, you know, she's probably going to do well. Then maybe there's, you know, LaDante in the corner. In your mind, he's kind of standoffish, you know, maybe he's dressed like a thug. And are you going to give him, you know, are you going to give him more time? Maybe, you know, you're not going to give him more time. Maybe the less time you have to spend with him, the better, actually. These are some of the mindsets, not anyone on here, but these are some of the mindsets that we can carry into the classroom with us, right? And so we just want to remember that how we show up, how we communicate and convey aptitude and abilities, even through nonverbal, it matters, and it has an impact on student success. Just a gentle reminder on microaggressions and claims of equivalency, very harmful behaviors. And final takeaways, I would ask you to be intentional about self-inventory. Once you know that a practice is harmful, stop doing it, stop propagating the system of inequity. And again, dialogue and self-reflection, they're going to present the largest, not on campus or at work, but when you're at home in your social circle, and you could actually be honest about what you feel and who you are, because nowadays you really can't say anything at work without, you know. So when you're at home, that dialogue, that self-reflection is going to present the largest opportunity for change. And then next, be an ally by deciding to take a stand against racist or inequitable practices. Research suggests, and then finally, empathy. Research suggests that people who have an enhanced capacity for empathy, they have this hyperactive mirror neuronal system in their brains. And these are the cells responsible for compassion. And we want to seize every opportunity to display empathy and compassion with our students. And the good news is empathy is a learned skill.
It's easy to put people in boxes. There's us, and there's them. The high earners, and those just getting by. Those we trust, and those we try to avoid. There's the New Danes, and those who've always been here. The people from the countryside, and those who've never seen a cow. The religious, and the self-confident. There are those we share something with, and those we don't share anything with.
Velkommen. Jeg kommer til at stille jer nogle spørgsmål i dag. Nogle af dem kan godt være lidt personlige, men jeg håber, I vil svare ærligt på. Hvem herinde i rummet var klassens klovn? Hvem er bonusforældre?
And then suddenly, there's us. We who believe in life after death. We who've seen UFOs. And all of us who love to dance. We who've been bullied. And we who've bullied others. And then there's us, the lucky ones who've had sex this past week. We who are broken-hearted. We who are madly in love. We who feel lonely. We who are bisexual. And we who acknowledge the courage of others. We who have found the meaning of life. And we who have saved lives. And then there's all of us who just love Denmark. So maybe there's more that brings us together than we think. TV2 Denmark.
So this video is really about empathy, and empathy of all of us fellows as instructors. Empathy is our secret weapon. As the nation recovers from the polarizing events that followed the death of George Floyd and return to our campuses, classrooms, and community after the pandemic, and as educators, we must acknowledge some pretty daunting realities. This is not just about the death of George Floyd. We must acknowledge that his death is only a singular occurrence in a scathing epidemic of collective race-based violence and systemic oppression perpetrated on Black people in this country. We must cease in our failure to recognize the undeniable truth. America is an amazing nation built on a foundation that did encompass slavery, white supremacy, and mass genocide. But it's a foundation that cannot stand if we choose to, if you choose to. The academic community must adopt an iterative process of developing and enforcing meaningful strategies like those covered today. And at the core of this presentation, if you take nothing else, I urge you to take the opportunity every semester to be human, remembering that there is more that connects us than there is that separates us. I want to leave you with some ideas from the Yale Center of Teaching and Learning on implementing diversity, equity, inclusion for every discipline. And there's also a reference list attached to this. And so I'm going to send that to Caroline Tippins. And so if you want to reference anything that we've covered today, and if you want ideas for increasing diversity in your classroom, it's all here for you. It's been an honor and a privilege to present to you today. Thank you guys so much for joining. There were 4 other breakout meetings that you could have gone to, but you came here. So I thank you and thank my department chair, Patrick, and my dean, Gina, for this. And now I want to open it up to dialogue. And I know I have until 2:45, so it's 2:44. So I just want to open it up the floor for dialogue right now. And if you have to go, by all means, go. Okay, so any hands, Patrick, just go ahead, and I just want to open up the floor for comments, questions, anything else for people that are kind of hanging around. Any comments, questions, outbursts, anything that you want to say. Jesus, I see your mic is off. I'm sorry. Go ahead. You have the floor. I'm sorry about that, interrupting you earlier.
You know, have you guys heard of the DOS study, where they survey little girls and boys as well, or little kids, and they show them two dolls. One is